So thanks very much for the invitation to speak today. So I'm going to talk about vaccine safety monitoring and COVID-19 vaccination programs. So these are my disclosures, number of funding sources. So I'm going to focus today on discussing the vaccine safety monitoring systems in place in Canada and how these systems have been adapted to monitor the safety of COVID-19 vaccine programs, and finally discuss the role of healthcare providers in supporting safety reporting and communication. So Dr. Halpin gave a nice overview of the vaccine life cycle, including emphasizing how safety is monitored in the preclinical and clinical stages. So I'm going to focus on post-market vaccine safety monitoring. And in Canada, there are three components to our post-market safety monitoring system. So the first is manufacturer regulation. And so all manufacturers with product vaccines authorized for use in Canada are required by law to submit vaccine safety data to Health Canada on a regular basis. And for COVID-19 vaccines, because they're not fully authorized, they're authorized under an interim order, there are even greater requirements on manufacturers to report emerging efficacy and safety data. There's also a vaccine lot release program that ensures consistency in the quality and potency safety of every vaccine dose that's released for use in the Canadian market. And then the focus of my presentation today is on post-market adverse event surveillance. So we have a number of different approaches to surveillance in Canada, including passive and active surveillance, as well as certain manufacturers have vaccine exposure registries for special populations, such as pregnant individuals. And then finally, I'll speak about clinical evaluation of patients who've experienced adverse events following immunization. And we have a network, a special immunization clinic network that I'll speak about that can be provided by signing up for the vaccinations. So the backbone of our vaccine safety surveillance system is passive surveillance through public health reporting, and those reports eventually make their way up to the Canadian Adverse Event Following Immunization Surveillance System, or CAFIS, which is housed at the Public Health Agency of Canada. And passive surveillance involves spontaneous reporting by healthcare providers who encounter patients who have had a recent vaccination and have a new medical event where there could be a concern that the vaccine was a factor in their health event. It doesn't require that healthcare providers have evidence that the vaccine caused the adverse event. We really want to cast a wide net, but any untoward medical event that doesn't have a clear other cause. And then most provinces and territories have mandatory reporting of certain serious adverse events following immunization, like those that are life-threatening or require hospitalization. And so the healthcare provider submits a report to their local public health unit, where those reports are then reviewed, and further investigation is done as needed, and initial recommendations may be made about proceeding with future vaccination. And then those reports are then collated at the provincial territorial level, where they're then they may be published at that level, or and then submitted to CAFIS. And there they are entered in the CAFIS database and undergo a medical case review if they're a serious adverse event. CAFIS and further analysis from there. CAFIS also receives reports from IMPACT, which is a active surveillance system for serious adverse events that lead to pediatric hospitalization. And they communicate with Health Canada through the Marketed Health Products Directorate and Canada Vigilance Program, which receives reports of adverse events from manufacturers primarily. So this system has been enhanced in a number of ways to monitor safety of COVID-19 vaccine programs. And really these types of enhancements are in place for all mass vaccine campaigns. So for a flu vaccine campaign every year, there are enhanced surveillance with expedited reporting of serious and unexpected adverse events to the Public Health Agency, and weekly calls between provincial, territorial, and federal health jurisdictions to share information. And with COVID-19, those calls have been extended and are placed a setting to early information sharing of adverse events that have not yet made it through the full reporting process and into CAFES, as well as to have discussions around new and emerging safety events in Canada and around the world. The CAFES team, the vaccine safety team, is also publishing adverse event data online on a weekly basis, and some of the provinces and territories are as well. And then they're doing additional analyses. They're capturing data on background rates for certain adverse events of interest, like thrombosis, and establishing a national expert causality assessment committee that will be in place to review serious adverse events to assess the causal relationship with vaccine. So this is just a screenshot of the weekly vaccine safety report that's put out by the Public Health Agency. It also breaks down adverse event reports by vaccine product, age and sex, and the type of adverse event. And this is updated every Friday, and several provinces, including Ontario and Alberta, are also publishing similar types of reports of their safety data. So moving on to active surveillance. So this is really a complement to the passive surveillance system, which the passive surveillance is mainly for signal detection. So casting a really wide net to find any types of adverse events that may possibly have any relationship with a vaccine, and that can be further analyzed to determine if there's any true association. Active surveillance is more targeted generally, so it involves either actively searching for all cases of a particular adverse event or all types of adverse events meeting certain criteria within a specific population. And that this can be used to both detect new safety signals or increase in known adverse events in association with vaccine, as well as to evaluate, in some cases, safety signals that are detected through the passive system. So I mentioned IMPACT earlier. So this is a hospital-based sentinel surveillance program. So we have nurse monitors at 12, soon to be 13 pediatric hospitals that monitor daily hospital admissions for certain types of conditions that can be adverse events following immunization. And then they report cases where a vaccine was given within a certain period prior to onset of that health event. And then we also have a participant-based active surveillance program called the Canadian National Vaccine Safety Network, which is a network within CIRN. And so, participant-based active adverse event reporting really involves engaging vaccine recipients who register online to receive a series of surveys about new health events that they experience after vaccination. And so they receive a survey link via email on days 8 after each vaccine dose and 6 months post-vaccination, which collects occurrence of adverse events that prevent daily activities or require medical attention. So for the large majority of participants, it takes 30 to 60 seconds to complete the survey, because if they have no adverse events. And then if they report an adverse event, we collect more details on symptoms and details of any medical visits. If they did seek medical attention, then they will receive a follow-up phone call from a research nurse or assistant to confirm that the medical visit was for an adverse event, as well as to capture further details. And any adverse events that meet provincial reporting criteria for public health will be reported to the passive surveillance system as well. So there's continuous feedback between these systems. So for COVID, Canvas has partnered with the Public Health Agency of Canada, provincial and territorial public health to massively scale up operations with a target of recruiting at least 400,000 participants across Canada and up to 50,000 controls. And controls are people who have not yet been vaccinated, and we recruit them to ask about recent health events within similar timeframes of 1 week, 1 month, and 6 months. And those estimates are used to estimate the background rates of health events in the population as a comparator for the post-vaccination rates. And so we've enrolled over 200,000 participants in 6 provinces and territories so far, and have ongoing enrollment of controls. It's actually really easy to sign up. You can go right on the website. You can click to enroll, either whether you've had the COVID vaccine and the green button there, or if you haven't had the COVID vaccine, you can sign up as a control. And then these are the 6 provinces and territories that are active. So BC, Alberta, Ontario, Nova Scotia, Yukon, and Quebec, and PEI is coming on board shortly. In Quebec, you can enroll through Clic Santé, the provincial vaccine booking system. And then, as I mentioned, once we detect safety concerns, either through Canvas, Impact, or the passive system, it's also then important to gather more evidence as to whether the vaccine is actually associated with a particular adverse event. And so this is part of the work being done by the Provincial Collaborative Network within CIRN, which Scott mentioned briefly in the context of vaccine effectiveness. So PCN brings together researchers from government, public health agencies, research institutes, who leverage existing laboratory immunization and health administrative databases that are linkable at the individual level. And so they use these linked databases to determine associations between health outcomes and COVID vaccination across provinces and multiple provinces, capturing about 90% of the Canadian population. And so they'll be looking at healthcare utilization as a measure of adverse events overall, so patterns of healthcare utilization post-vaccine versus non-vaccine periods, and in population subgroups, including immune compromise and people with underlying conditions like HIV. And they'll be testing as well for specific associations between certain adverse events and vaccination, so such as thrombosis. They conduct their analyses in parallel in each province because of provincial data sharing legislation. And then they combine the estimates across provinces and meta-analyses to generate a combined estimate across the country. And then finally, how do we manage patients who've had adverse events following immunization? And this is where the Special Immunization Clinic Network comes in, which is another network within CIRN. And the SICs were established to standardize and improve the care of patients with previous adverse events following immunization and to really optimize immunization in those patient groups. We also have gathered data to estimate the rate of adverse event recurrence following revaccination, and have developed a research platform for clinical vaccine safety studies. So we have a national team of expert clinicians in vaccine safety, including infectious disease specialists, allergists, immunologists, and have brought in other specialists, such as hematologists, oncologists, for special studies. And our network's really embedded within routine clinical care. So patients are referred to an SIC by a healthcare provider, where they then undergo a standardized assessment of the adverse event. And we also see patients who have underlying medical conditions that may complicate immunization as well. And then recommendations around the best way to proceed with vaccination are made based on network protocols and shared decision-making with patients. Patients are then vaccinated in the clinic where possible, if recommended, and then they're followed up post-vaccination to capture any adverse events that may have occurred. And then we enter all their data in our national database for later analysis. So we started out as a pediatric network primarily, and we have expanded considerably since the fall of 2020, thanks to additional funding from CIHR, the Public Health Agency. And so we've established several new adult SIC sites, primarily led by allergist immunologists. We've expanded rapid referral processes with public health in various jurisdictions, and certainly made them aware that we're available to support AFI monitoring in the provinces. We've adapted our protocols and data collection forms for adverse events of interest for COVID vaccines, and have been developing clinical protocols for evaluating patients with anaphylaxis and other hypersensitivity reactions, as well as more recently having discussions around the thrombosis with thrombocytopenia syndrome, which has also been referred to as VITT. And we're collaborating on studies of safety and immunogenicity in immune compromised populations. So this just shows our SIC sites, and we hope with some additional funding to add to be able to cover 9 provinces across the country. So in summary, vaccine safety is rigorously monitored and even through multiple mechanisms that have been enhanced significantly for COVID-19 vaccines. And, I would encourage everyone to, if you haven't gotten vaccinated yet, to enroll in Canvas when you do, and to encourage your patients to enroll in Canvas as well. We're capturing whether people are immunocompromised or not. And there's potential to collaborate with Canvas on specific studies around patients with HIV if that's of interest. And then finally, healthcare providers who see patients that they suspect may have an adverse event following immunization should report those to public health.